All right, folks, Tito, Jeff Thitoff here with your Browns Blitz. Thanks so much for tuning in. Lots to get into today. We'll start off talking about the draft and this thing, the quarterback situation, and about the Browns' upcoming new stadium, I guess we'll call it that. Anyway, I've said before, I think it's a great draft by the Browns. I think they did a fantastic job this year. I like the pick of Spencer Fano, the offensive lineman who they got out of Utah, the number 9 pick overall. And here is Andrew Berry, the GM of the Browns, talking about the offensive line in general for your Cleveland Browns.
I'd say if you're on the O-line, you typically need to be able to play two spots. I'd say probably more so than versatility, it was resiliency within the O-line in terms of how you build that position group. Versatility is one way to do it. Strength in numbers is another way to do it. I think we'll be in a position where we have both. With Spencer in particular, look, we're looking to park him at left tackle and let him play. So while it's nice that he's played several spots, that's not our vision for him.
So that makes perfect sense. This guy's very talented. The Browns were going to take him at 6, but they got to trade back with Kansas City to number 9, and they still got the guy they wanted. That's why I think this is such a great draft for the Browns. And I don't always say that. Look, I've been critical of the Browns for a lot of their drafts. The Browns and Bengals both had fantastic drafts this year. But when they dropped from 6 to 9 with the Chiefs so they could move up, the Browns then started getting some calls about that number 9 pick, and here is Barry talking about that.
We did get several calls for 6. We thought through, I should say this, we got several calls for 6 and 9, the combination of 6 and 9. At 6, Kansas City made the most sense because it was a big enough move where we could pick up resources, but also small enough with what had happened on the board that, we could get, one of our short list of targets, of which, Spencer was at the top. And then at 9, we did get a little bit of action there as well, but nothing that necessarily compelled us to move off of the pick.
Great draft for Cleveland. Look, Casey Concepcion, Denzel Boston. I thought Boston would go ahead of him, but great value on Boston at 39 for the Browns on that one. Their receiver room's going to look a lot different this year. And I wonder if they will they probably are, I would think. I got to believe they're trying to move Jerry Jeudy, but he's with the Browns right now. So I'm not sure if they'll be able to move him or not. But look, I'd be fine if they decided to do that. If they decided to make that move, and move on from him, I'd be fine with that. I did love the Austin Barber pick out of Florida, the offensive tackle there. They've completely revamped this offensive line, and it's it'll be fascinating to see how well they do this year with that revamped offensive line. They also took Taylen Green out of Arkansas, so that means you've got Taylen Green, you've got Deshaun Watson, you've got Shedeur Sanders and Dylan Gabriel. All 4 will not be on the team, I would not believe, when the season starts. And the talk is, reports are, that Deshaun is in the lead for that starting quarterback spot. I wonder if you as Browns fans, because I remember talking to people last season when there was talk about Watson being cleared to come back and play and whatnot. And most of the vibe I got from Browns fans was that I don't want Watson on this. I don't want Watson playing. I don't want to see Watson play. He's a scumbag. He stole the money from the Browns. He's a scumbag. I don't want to play. But now it seems that's flipped a little bit. And I get the feeling that Browns fans will be okay if Deshaun Watson's the number 1 quarterback this season. My problem with that is, look long term. This is it for Watson after this year. After this year, they're done paying him. So let's say Deshaun Watson's the best quarterback for this team. Would you rather go 8-9 with Deshaun Watson or 4-13 with Shedeur Sanders? If you go 8-9 with Deshaun Watson, just like the Steelers been the last few years, you're good. Getting middle of the rounds, middle of the draft, as far as first round goes, you still need positions like a quarterback they'll probably need. But would you rather go 8-9 or 3-14? If I told you Watson gets you at 8-9, maybe 9-8, maybe a first round game, or 3-14 with Shedeur. As a Steelers fan, which I am, I'd rather go 3-14 and bottom her out, if that's a word. And I as a Brown, I would not want to root for Deshaun Watson. And if he's starting for the Browns, that's what you're doing. You're rooting for Deshaun Watson. Maybe he gives you the best chance to be better, best chance to win, best chance to make the playoffs. Sure, all those things are true. But do you want to have a season where you're rooting for Deshaun Watson? Or would you rather go 3-14, 4-13, and get a chance at one of these top quarterbacks in this next class coming up in 2027? So let's say, for argument's sake, you do have Deshaun Watson there. You've got Taylen Green, your draft pick. I would think you want to keep him. And you're getting rid of one of the quarterbacks. God, it's such a great argument with Bobby Carpenter about this earlier in the week. Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, if they are even, let's say that no matter which one of those two, let's say you put one of those two on the team, it doesn't affect the win-loss total at all. Doesn't affect it either way. Maybe they start some games, maybe they don't. Depends on Watson, depends what happens during the season, injuries and whatnot. But let's say you've got two players like that who do not impact, will have the same impact. Let's put it that way. The same impact on your wins and losses. Which one do you cut? Now, I'm not here to tell you one's better than the other. But I'm here to tell you if they have the impact, the same exact impact, it's a tie. You don't know who to cut or get rid of, maybe to trade. For me, the answer is easy. It's going to be Dylan Gabriel. And my reason behind it is Shedeur Sanders makes the Browns more relevant, good or bad, however you want to look at it. Most of the Browns' talk last year was not about Jerry Jeudy. It was about, on the offensive side of the ball, who was the player most often talked about when it comes to the Browns last year? It was Shedeur Sanders. More sports radio stations, more reporters, more social media, I have to believe, talked about Shedeur Sanders than any other player on the Browns roster. So if there's a tie there, and maybe the Browns organization look at, nope, you know what, Shedeur's better than Gabriel. Or like, you know what, Gabriel's better than Shedeur. That's fine. If the Browns feel like one is that much better than the other, that's the one you're keeping. But if it's close or even a tie, somewhere very close, you take the one that's going to get your team talked about more. And if Shedeur Sanders never starts a game this year but gets some mop-up duty, however he does, it's going to be the story. Dylan Gabriel, no one will bat an eye. And so the pushback I got was, oh, no, you want to put the best one, whoever's going to win. You shouldn't put that into account. Folks, listen. Sports is not just about sports. Sports is not just about wins and losses. It's also about relevancy and eyeballs and advertising and marketing. Don't think that's true? Look at the teams. You could have teams that had the same record and one is much more relevant than the other. If the Cowboys go 7-10 this year and the Colts go 7-10 this year, and trying to think of another team to throw in there, the Chargers go 7-10 this year, who do you think gets talked about the most? It's the Cowboys. They're the most relevant. That's the way it is. So you also have to figure that into your franchise's value and how your franchise is perceived. Because there's a lot of people, a lot of stations, a lot of radio stations, a lot of podcasts, a lot of social media that talked about the Browns because of Shedeur Sanders last year that wouldn't have if it was Dylan Gabriel. If Dylan Gabriel started the entire season, you know what the story would be? Why isn't Shedeur Sanders starting? Why can't Shedeur Sanders play in the NFL? Mel Kiper said he should be a top 5 pick. It would not be, how's Dylan Gabriel doing? Was it a great pick in the 3rd round? It would not be that. It'd be about Shedeur. So if you want to put your head in the sand and say winning and losing, that's what matters most. That's all that matters. It's not. It's not just about wins and losses in a lot of cases. Sure, winning is great. The Browns going to the playoffs would be outstanding. But if you're not going to the playoffs, and newsflash, they're not. Keep the most relevant player if it's close. And I'm not campaigning for Sanders to be the starter or to be the backup or whatever. I'm not campaigning for that in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying that if it's a tie or close, keep the one that gets people talking about your franchise more. And by the way, if I'm the Browns, I do want to bottom out. I don't want to go 8-9, 7-10. I'd much rather go 4-13. See what I've got with Shedeur Sanders as a full offseason and starting quarterback. Because if Watson does poorly, you still spent all that money. If Watson does well, you still spend all that money. And by the way, he's gone. because there's no way you can have Shedeur Sanders on the team after what he did. I don't care how good he is this year. I don't care how good Shedeur Sanders is this year for the Browns. He starts the entire season. The only way you can keep or try to re-sign him is if they make a playoff run. Make a run in the playoffs. Not make a playoff run. I'm not saying get to the playoffs. Make a run in the playoffs. Other than that, you don't want this guy associated with your roster, with your team anymore, with your fan base. There's no way. All right, one last piece I want to get to here. The Browns broke ground on their stadium, the new stadium, $2.4 billion stadium that is scheduled to open up in 2029. There's still some controversy around it because there's a bunch of money that the state of Ohio committed to the project, but they're with like unclaimed funds. They took $1 billion allegedly from unclaimed funds through the state. There's a class action suit about that, and also questions about constitutional prohibitions that are violated against taking people's private property for government use. That's all. So it's still there. Mike DeWine, the governor, doesn't think the litigation will be settled by the time he's out of office. I think it's in January after being there for a couple of terms. So DeWine's upset about it. And Jimmy Haslam, he's been talking about stadium since about a new stadium since 2018. And they were originally just going to renovate the current Brown Stadium over there on the lake. But that one opened in 1999 after replacing Cleveland Municipal Stadium, which was demolished in 1996. So they're leaving this all this goes together with Brook Park and where they're going to go. All of this means that the Browns are leaving downtown Cleveland if all this goes through. The city of Cleveland went against it, but then they settled with that when the Browns agreed to pay for the current Brown Stadium to be demolished. And then they'll do some lakefront development there. So now it comes into things like, what will the Browns be able to do with the stadium? What will the city of Cleveland, what will Cleveland be able to do with the stadium? Because it'll be a dome. So now they can have a Final Four there. They can have stuff year-round there. And possibly holding a Super Bowl, maybe a draft also. It's probably maybe a draft and then maybe a Super Bowl is probably the way you should look at it there. Roger Goodell said that he thinks that's a very real possibility. He said that he was at the after the groundbreaking ceremony that the stadium, if it all goes the way it is, will still be able to host a Super Bowl, but they need to get other things like more hotel rooms in there. He said that Goodell said that Cleveland has only half the rooms that's needed at a minimum to host it. He did say they could host the NFL draft. It did in 2021, but that was a COVID when there were all restrictions in place, so it could very well happen. And at first, I was thinking to myself, I wouldn't want to go to a Super Bowl in Cleveland. What the hell? I want to go to a warm weather place. And then I was pushed back on that. Well, they have it in Indy. Yeah, that's true. They do have it in Indy. Most of the time, it's in a warm weather place. And I think what pushed it over the edge, I think when I started thinking, do a little self-reflection, if you will. Is there other reflections or self-reflections only one? Nonetheless, self-reflection. And I think part of my reason is that I don't like the idea is because I don't like Cleveland having a dome. It makes perfect business sense. I get it. Perfect sense to be able to have the facility available year-round and get a chance to bring in other events, big-time events like the Final Four we talked about. But I just don't think Cleveland should be a dome city, much like Buffalo shouldn't be a dome city. Kansas City should not be a dome team. Pittsburgh should never be a dome team. New England shouldn't. All the teams like that, they don't belong in domes. I want them playing out there in the elements, but I understand it's going to happen. I understand at some point all 32 teams will probably be domed. That'll probably happen at some point when it's probably 34 teams, nonetheless. All right, folks, that's it for me, Jeff Thitoff. Follow me on Twitter @ThitHappens. This